Good evening, Taos. Welcome to this, our third edition of Misfits, Malcontents, and Mystics. And can I just say thank you for coming out first and foremost. Thank you very much. So Misfits, Malcontents, and Mystics, the idea behind this is it's storytelling. And these are true Taos stories told by your friends and neighbors. And each event benefits a different nonprofit. Tonight we're here in favor of Cancer Support Services. So I've asked Jason. Jason Pfeiffer's a little bit amazing. When I did the first event, it was for the Paseo. And immediately afterwards in the lobby, he came up to me and he said, "Can we do one for Cancer Support Services?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he's just been on fire with the thing from beginning to now. So here's Jason to tell you a little bit about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Clint. And this wouldn't happen without Clint. So again, Clint, you rock. Yeah, give him a round of applause. Come on. Your hands will hurt by the end of this, I promise. The other thing Clint said to me was, yeah, we'll do one for cancer support if you read a story. So I will be reading tonight, and it's taken me since that first event to finish it. Yeah, and you'll hear more about that later. But Cancer Support Services, what is it? Before I get into that, just if you have had cancer or have cancer, please stand up for a moment. Please. All right. Give them a hand. Stay standing, please. Don't sit down just yet. And if you've been touched by cancer, stand up. And just about everyone stands up. Yeah, cancer is unfortunately part of what's happening in our world these days. It's become quite the disease. There's a lot of people that are living with it most of their lives. And the fortunate thing about where we live and what we have is we have this program which provides, just in a nutshell, non-medical, alternative, holistic support for families that are experiencing cancer. So what the program does is can pay for up to $800 a year in non-medical alternative support. So we help people get to treatments in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, Denver, MD Anderson, paying for gas. We help pay for food, weekly yoga, weekly support groups, acupuncture, massage, personal care, all these support services that are here to help promote healing and ease stress. And we can't do it without fundraising. It's 100% donation-based. All the money that we make goes right back into the program to serve families in Taos and Western Colfax County. So I just want to thank you for being here because this goes a long way. You have no idea what myself and Liz, the assistant coordinator, the kind of help that we provide to people on a daily basis. So give yourself a round of applause for that. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. So our first reader I met probably within her first week of moving to Taos, which was just a couple of months ago. And she was reading a book at the bar, and I was instantly intrigued. And I walked up and I said, this is terribly rude. I said, but I always have to know what somebody's reading if they're reading in public. And she showed me what she was reading, and I could just see it. I said, "You're a writer, aren't you?" And she said, "Yeah, I am." And I said, "Okay, I'm going to give you your first assignment." I said, "You've got new eyes into our town here. I'd like you to tell a story about it." So Rose Pearson.
I was unusually short with my mom when we first arrived in Taos. We got here at night, and I was flooded with anxiety about all the lights. The signs for Best Western and Motel 8, the cars, even the stoplights were daunting, signaling to me, "Turn back. This is not the place you thought it was." When the GPS told me that Blueberry Hill didn't even exist, my anxiety spiked. We aren't supposed to be here. We have to turn back. This can't be Taos. We stopped at 5 Star Burger, and that was at first terrifying. Why is it so nice and clean? This building isn't adobe. Where are the wild-eyed mountain people? The tarot card reader? The crew of black-clad poets reading and murmuring to themselves in the corner? I went to the bathroom and comforted myself with the purple walls. At least the walls are purple. I can hold my hopes on that. I go out, and my mom is outside, probably talking on the phone, but I imagine her taking deep breaths, reminding herself of why she likes me. I order some wine, and the waitress comes into focus. So, what brings you here? Ah, this question, how I've grown to humor thee. The answer, I've discovered, is liable to change, but all the variations boil down to the now famous refrain, I was called. I tell this lady something that seems basic, but it doesn't seem to shake the why out of her eyes. My answers never do. The following 4 days was a mix of exhilarating hope and hellish frustration. I wanted nothing more than to be alone, and my mom was being remarkably helpful. Don't get me wrong. My mom has never made my bed for me. She didn't push me to do my homework, tell me how to dress, put up a fight when I started smoking cigarettes when I was 15. If I owe her money, I pay her back in full, sometimes with interest. She's got my back, but she's definitely what you'd call a hands-off parent. So this bout of involvement was sort of like the answer to my maternal prayers. We always want what we don't have, and I often longed for the kind of mother that would comb my hair into a French twist and ask me about my boy troubles. And now that I was getting her version of this, I wanted nothing but to be left to my own devices. I wanted and needed a desk. A desk. I felt like I wouldn't fully be here without it. I needed that desk like a sailor lost at sea needs a lifeboat. We write wherever we happen to be, but it's a placeholder, a shrine to a craft I've been married to. Without it, this box of walls would never be my room, and I needed something to call mine. I bought the desk from a bouncy, gregarious man who offhandedly mentioned being the mayor of Taos, which made sense at the time. His attitude towards buying and selling felt borderline philanthropic, as though these items have a specific place where they belong, and getting them there is improving the very state of the universe. When he showed me my desk, I knew immediately this is the one, but already I wondered if I could live with the choice I made, kind of like an ambivalent bride right before ceremony. Buoyantly, he pointed things out. And look at these drawers, such great storage space. How much? He calculated out loud, which was an effect of showmanship I immediately forgave him because he has overwhelming virtues. Well, I got it for $80, and this is a really nice desk, good wood, not that laminate stuff. Yes. I stared at him, staring at the floor, presumably working out the gains and losses from the past 2 years, sussing out where this desk would put him on that pendulum. But I'll sell it to you for $60. I was overjoyed. I had it in my mind that I was poor, bordering on destitution upon my arrival with $800 to my name. This is the skewed financial barometer of a lower middle class kid raised in the second wealthiest county in the whole fucking world. I was, of course, rich beyond my knowing, but that's the thing, it was beyond my knowing and probably still is. The last 2 days, I'm ashamed to say, my attitude towards my mom didn't improve. I didn't want to talk about my experiences. I didn't want to fawn over the details of the Pueblo and the plaza. This was my home now, and I am not a tourist anymore. I ignored her as we ate at the Guadalajara Grill, absorbed in writing or reading. I did this more than once. Money became a thing, as it's liable to do when you're operating from some deeply held belief that you'll be left to starve. My mom is a financial MacGyver, stringing together seemingly disconnected money-making detritus into something that actually works. But her adopted child is a worst-case scenario kind of person. Visions of street corners and shitty coffee. So I started acting itchy every time my mom put down her card to get us that food or those margaritas or whatever it was. I wanted to scream, "That's enough! We need to be investing in rice, beans, space blankets, first aid, life vests. No more of this suicidal frip." I pretty much did say that in a garbled, pathetically tearful speech about my financial crisis. She read between the lines. "Mom, I don't want you here." When we got back to the house, I told her I needed some time alone. I alluded to my grounding, loving future self who was seeing me act like a maniac bitch and would surely come to the rescue. That night, I ended up at the coffee spot, grateful to have a place to go at 9 p.m. that smelled like morning and is as weird as I am. I smoked a 75-cent cigarette, and as I left, I overshared with the embarrassed cashier. I did it. He told me that his mom just moved back to town. He didn't elaborate. He just blinked at me and looked down as if to say, "You think you've got problems?" The word in Spanish is ingrata, ungrateful. It's like a thing you become. Ingrata and ingrata, like a black scurrying little mite that you have to bomb with pesticides. And ingrata, like a folkloric myth akin to a chimera, but this one is half ass and half mouth. And ingrata, a petulant child that's screaming its head off because he wanted vanilla, not strawberry. And ingrata, that was me. Driving home, I was overwhelmed by that future self I had prophesied. She came down on me like a hero, clad in a righteous onesie, a sparkling cape, a stern, benevolent look in her eye. Let's set things right. I was driving on unfamiliar roads, but justice was calling, and I had to text back. So I fumbled for my phone, and I started the precarious process. And then the worst thing next to me veering into oncoming traffic happened. She texted first. "I think I'll have you take me to the rental car place tomorrow. This is obviously too stressful for the both of us." Oh, God. And then, "I love you, Rosie girl." No. And then the kicker. If I could leave tonight, I would. A thought rang forth like an alarm had gone off. I am an asshole. This kind of communication is not unlike my mom. Like an ox, she'll plow through one offense after another until she breaks down with a certain rawness and finality that always takes me off guard. I apologized. I stripped myself of defenses and admitted to being a jerk, and my mom conceded in tears. Mom tears. The sort I have avoided and tried to prevent with jokes and an unrelenting levity for as long as I can remember. I have tried to be the good daughter. I tried because I thought I had to try. When I turned 13, I lost all the stops to those bottles of turmoil. It came pouring out all over my life. I never did acquire all those stops again, but that year I had it out for my mom because I was on fire with resentment, and that turmoil is flammable. Why aren't you my real mother? Where is she? Why are you fat and ugly? Why do you watch TV like a zombie slave? Why don't you ever bring a man around? Why don't I have a dad? Why don't you say anything? Why are you so grumpy? Why did Barbara leave? Why is your family from dumbfuck Nebraska and so bland and uninteresting? Why don't you teach me music or tell me stories? Why do you laugh through your nose? Are you afraid of making a sound? Why is it always just us? Why am I your daughter? That was 1 year, and then I cut it out. Because on some level, I believed if I kept it up, my mom would abandon me, just like them. Be nice, Rose. That's a good girl. Today, I was cleaning out my desk, my vessel, and that meanness returned to me through the winding adventure of the time between. In all of those weeks, it is still there. If there's one thing I'm learning, it's that Taos makes you honest. You can't hide here. I realize now I have to stop pretending everything is all right inside my head. It just doesn't work anymore. This love is so wild and impossible to predict. How ugliness can set us free, and all the pretty words in the world can leave us stranded without a boat, in the desert, no less. Thank you.
Pretty good for her first assignment, eh? Woo! Yeah, and since you can't lie in Taos, I guess I'm going to have to rewrite my story. But I got a while. I'm going to be last, so it'll be all right. Our next reader, Deborah Higginson, come start to make your way up here. Have you all seen the wood chips that are floating around town? Yeah, wood chip wonder. So Deborah, I met in the back of Dave Stewart's, Wired's office there, and she has these amazing wood chips. Now her wood chips are part of every single support group that the Cancer Support Services program does as a check-in to allow us to get present and in the moment before we start our group. And some of the amazing blessings that have come out of these chips are just so close to my heart and heartfelt. I'm honored to have Deborah here tonight, reading you a story about her relationship with Taos. Thank you.
Whoa. I was going to introduce myself, but cause I just wanted to say, hi, I'm Deborah Higginson. And, oh, the microphone. Okay. Whew. Can't hear me, I guess. How's that? You can hear me now? Hi, I'm Deborah Higginson. All right. I have a soft voice. I told a friend of mine that I was going to speak here tonight, and I was really nervous. And he says, if you can make it up on stage without tripping and falling down, and you can remember your own name, you'll be okay after that. Well, we'll see. So far, so good. I haven't fallen down. Anyway, I feel really honored, and Jason just, touched my heart just now. So thank you so much for letting me share my story and a couple of poems I've written that's from my book, Messages from the Heart. I first came to Taos in the fall of 1993. It was October, and it was so beautiful. All the trees were in full bloom, and that drive coming up from Santa Fe to Taos through that canyon, and then coming up over that hill, and that big giant crack in the ground just captured my heart. And Taos Mountain, I knew why everyone was talking about Taos and how beautiful it was. I was living in Big Bear Lake, California at the time. It's beautiful there too, but this just took my breath away. And I decided, even after a couple days here, I wanted to live here. And so after a couple miracles happened, in May the following year, I actually moved to Taos. So this first poem that I'm going to share is one that I wrote just after I first moved to Taos. Take me to the land of enchantment and ancient wisdom, where the clouds speak and seekers seek reality of life, where the days are long and warm and flowers bloom profusely, where shadows loom, luring passers-by who seek relief from the heat, where the sun shines with a light that illuminates every living thing and kisses all goodnight at dusk with its soft pink lips. Take me there where every breath of life is precious and peacefulness is not hard to find, and miracles and dreams become a way of life, where no 2 days are exactly alike. Take me to Taos, New Mexico. And that's exactly how I felt when I arrived here. And then a few months after I moved to Taos, my mother passed away. She had cancer. And I wrote this next poem as if she was speaking to me, or speaking, and I was just writing down her words. It was like a message that she was leaving to all those who loved her. And this is her message. Let me revel in the sweetness of life just a little longer. Let me smile and feel the happiness I have known through the years. Let me calm the hearts of those who cling to my body, for the time is coming soon when it will no longer serve me and I will move on. The light is shining bright for me now, and peace is just around the corner, but I know there are some who hate to see me go. Let me somehow show them it's what I want for me, not so much to leave them and cause them to grieve, but to ease the burden of my body and feel the peace that awaits me on the other side. Let me say goodbye with grace and dignity and with a smile in my heart. I'll leave behind the things I have carried through my life, and I'll take with me the love I have been given. Let me leave a song of love in the hearts I leave behind, for I will be singing with the wind through the trees, inviting those who hear to sing along. Let me revel in the sweetness of life just a little longer, and when it's time to leave, let me move on and be free. My mother was a wonderful, loving person, and she shared love with everyone she knew, people she met. It was great. She was just a great inspiration for me. And we used to do a lot of arts and crafts when we were kids, and my sister and my mom and me. And she would share a lot of the things that she made with different charities or organizations for fundraising. And after her passing in July of 1994, I've been making these little wood chips that have love burned on them. They look like this. I'm sure Jason already told you all about them, but now you know why and where they come from. And I make them, pretty much make them all, from the sticks, from the trees to everything, but that's not what this is about. I recently told somebody that for as long as I live and for as long as I'm able, I cannot make enough of these chips and share them with people. After 21 years, I still love doing them. I just can't stop. I'm just so, my mother is feeding me, I guess, to keep it on. So I appreciate everybody that wants to take them and share them with other people. My sister makes some too, and she recently said in a conversation we had that she says, "Isn't it amazing the power of a single word?" And it is so amazing, and every word means something different to each person because it's just what touches their life. And the stories I've heard that have come back about these magical little pieces of wood are just so touching for me to hear them. And they're all about love and inspiration and how magical they seem to have arrived in their life or served them in some way. So I believe there's no greater power than love. There's no such thing as too much love. And I recommend sharing a little love every chance you get. I spend most of my spare time making love, wood chips. Wood chips. So it's a wonderful life. Thank you so much for letting me share my story.
Thank you, Deborah. That's beautiful. I spend most of my time making love and wood chips, too. James Nave has been around a long time, and he's been on the literary scene for a long time. And when I was putting together the first event of Misfits, Malcontents, and Mystics, I asked him if he would read. And he kind of put me off a little bit. And he asked me this time, he said, would you mind if I submitted something? I said, are you kidding me? James Nave has worked with Julia Cameron. He's one of the founders of the slam movement. If you didn't make his last Story Slam event out of the Mesa Brewery, he has another one coming up. When is that, Nave? Last Monday in December. Okay, right after Christmas. Sibling rivalry, and it's an open kind of thing. You can come and you can submit your name in the hat, and maybe you'll tell a story. James Nave.
Like so many of you, I came to Taos about sometime in my life, precisely 20 years ago this month, or this fall. And when I came, I was young and vital and could run lots and lots of miles, and there are plenty to run around here. And I've been coming and going into Taos for the last 20 years, off and on in all kinds of different versions. So when Clint said he wanted me to read for the cancer benefit for the hospital, at first I said, well, I don't have anything to read. But actually, I do have something to read. 5 years ago, I walked into my doctor's office, still thinking I could run those 45 miles, and she said, your PSA is a little high. You should have it checked. Well, talk about feeling like a misfit, feeling malcontented. I don't know about mystical, but I felt really undone. And when I was a boy, my mother would say to me, you are a part of all that you have met, yet all experience is an arch, where through gleams that untraveled world, whose margin fades forever and forever as you move. She was quoting Ulysses by Alfred Lord Tennyson, and of course Ulysses took the heroic journey on and on until the day he died, as we all do. So I'm in the coffee shop completely undone by this, and I go to Dr. Scott Donaldson, and he's a bit like a jet pilot. He says, well, you know, you've got prostate cancer, man, and you just have to have it chopped out. and he said, but what kind of poetry are you reading? And I'm like, this is surreal. Well, it turned out that Scott was a good surgeon, and Scott did put me on the operating table. He did take my prostate out. I am not necessarily what I would say a cancer survivor, as much as a surgery survivor. I managed to get through with it. And what I'd like to offer you tonight, because we are a part of all that we have met, sometimes we think we have a lot more strength than we do, and then other times we find out how much strength we actually have. I woke up from the surgery on April 1st, and it was 30-30, which is April is Poetry Month. And so you write one poem a day for 30 days. And so I'm in the hospital bed, and I just recorded one, which wasn't a poem. It was really just sort of a morphine-driven prose. And and Donaldson said, shit, Jesus, man, that you sound like you were drunk, the doctor. So for 100 days, I wrote something every day. And I wrote part of it in Asheville, North Carolina, which is my blood birth home. I wrote a lot of it here in Taos, which is my art brother-sister home. And I wrote some of it in New York City, which is my urban street home, I guess. So Asheville, North Carolina, on the 7th day, I wrote this, and I'll read you 6 pieces just to give you a sense of where it was. For those of you who haven't had a checkup, I encourage it. Go to the doc. It's worthwhile. Don't do that tomorrow. And can art heal? I don't know. Can art keep you relevant? Yeah, it can. So practice whatever art you have. This is number 7. It was based in Asheville, North Carolina. Day 7 of my surgery, I was wobbling around a little bit like a duck. This morning by the Carolina mountainside, I climbed down my spine, one bone at a time. As I descended into unfamiliar territory, I realized I was in a rainforest filled with things I didn't expect to see: iguanas, bats, lizards, snakes, scaly-tailed squirrels, toucans, fairy bluebirds, and millions of butterflies. Beautiful, graceful butterflies. A purple one landed on a bush, followed by another, red with pink dots, and then another, big brown eyes. Arrived at my pelvis, stood between my hips, and thought, I've been attacked by blades and fingers. As I surveyed my moist rainforest body, I saw repair. Nothing to weep about here, I thought. And with that, I climbed back up my spine, one bone at a time. And that was day 7. People who have cancer, and those of you who have experienced it, you stood up. I stood up with you. And then the rest of the room stood up. It's the rest of the room that makes matters better. I couldn't have gone through this. I could have gone through it by myself in a closet, I suppose. But my friends loved me, and I loved my friends. And so my friend Andrew Brown said, come to my house for a couple of weeks and sit in my permaculture garden in Asheville, North Carolina. So I did, and I slept in the bed upstairs in their farmhouse. On number 25, day 25, I wrote early in the morning, your mouth is beautiful. A tiny clock purrs, 3 a.m. I have become a small pond. My mouth, my face is a mirror you can look into. Stare as long as you like. Consider the angle of your nose, the lift of your chin, the slant of your eyes. Your mouth is beautiful. Yesterday, a guard bee from one of Andrew's hives stung my cheek because I was too close, thinking the bees would ignore me. Nature knows more than we know how far we should go. It's 4 a.m. The tiny clock still purrs, and your mouth is still beautiful. And then, determined guy that I was, I thought, I'm coming to Taos. So I dragged, and Donaldson said, oh, Jesus, man, don't drive out there. Your brain will explode. So I got on an airplane, flew to Taos, and a good friend of mine loaned me his Mini Cooper. And I was here for 3 weeks, determined to be in Taos. And on day 53, a good friend of mine invited me for dinner. And he's well known for a lot of things, and if you've ever been to dinner at his house, you will know that in the summertime he's well known for many hummingbirds. And this is number 53, kamikaze hummingbirds. A hummingbird weighs 6 grams and fast dives at 60 miles an hour. During the summer when I was 6, Uncle Johnny told me that God gave hummingbirds sharp beaks so they could fly through little boys. Until I was 12, I was more afraid of hummingbirds than I was of dogs with rabies, black widow spiders, copperheads, poison ivy, chicken pox, and bald-faced hornets. I had visions of kamikaze hummingbirds flying through my chest. I've long since lost my fear. Last night at Paul Pasquarella's house, dozens of hummingbirds buzzed his feeders. How could I have ever believed those tiny creatures could cut through anything but air? And then on day 55, still in Taos, I wrote a little piece and I titled it, She Let Him Slip Away. Just south of Taos, on my way to Santa Fe this morning, a road sign warned, bighorn sheep. You all know where that sign is, I bet, don't you, just before you. I scanned the land for wildlife, and nothing moved but my Mini Cooper gliding 60 miles an hour, sunroof pushed back, window down, scent of sage in the air, and Spanish music on the radio. I downshifted for the curves and started thinking about the first time I heard Janis Joplin sing Me and Bobby McGee. I always thought when Janis said she let him slip away that she meant that he left her for another woman, or that he hoboed to Seattle because he loved the rails more than he loved her, or he just plain turned mean and robbed a bank. Now I know better. Bobby died, and he did it in the arms of a woman that loved him. That's a sweet story when you think about it. An hour after I got to Santa Fe, I watched a young married couple ordering sandwiches at the Aztec Cafe. They touched each other while they waited. The air was clean and dry, and a few white clouds floated in the egg blue sky. While I was writing these pieces, I didn't really write about cancer, nor did I write about my recovery, and yet everything around me was about my recovery. And there's a regenerative nature about the world, and especially here in Taos. There's something, they say it's sacred. I believe it is. It's magical. You know, we are mystical perhaps even here. And this one was written on during Memorial Day, number 59. We're moving toward 100 days. I did survive all of this. And this one is called Helmets Be Damned. And if you've ever been here on Memorial Day, you will recognize this. Hundreds of Harleys have invaded Taos this Memorial Day weekend. The bikers, mostly men with gray in their beards, ride their hogs, feet propped above power-stoking engines that boom through silver pipes past Taos Gem and Mineral, Song's Asian Restaurant, and Anthony Lopez's law office. Harleys were roaring through Taos long before Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda rode easy over the Rio Grande, looking for adventure and a place to smoke and lightning into the 21st century where they would never grow old. Just like the bikers this weekend. Helmets be damned. These cats are riding with their souls free down the long road that always curves out of Sunday morning. They lean into the long air, never noticing how their shadows ripple across fence post, barbed wire, and no trespassing signs. Meanwhile, far away up in the mountains, the bells tingle on the slopes. Sheep wander. A young man with a rugged stick stares into the perfect openness of passing hours. His voice is a deer coming out of a tree. Eyes see everything when they are allowed to look. Do not be afraid of what water does to stone. And after that, I went to New York City. And I'll read the last poem in this bit here. But I didn't forget Taos. And poem number 84 was written in response to poem number 83. I mentioned Paul Pasquarella earlier. Well, Paul had called me up on day 83 to tell me he was fishing somewhere in the Rockies in a big stream. And he was telling me how to fish. So I'm standing there recovering from my surgery. Paul is telling me how he's catching fish, and I could see Paul in the mountains up to here in the water. I had this big vision. But he wasn't satisfied with the story, so he called me the next day, and he's going to tell me more about it. So this piece is called Velocity of the Breaching Stream. Not satisfied with our conversation yesterday about the nuances of releasing trout into a fast-moving stream, Paul Pasquarella phoned again this morning. With my mobile to my ear, I descended 6 flights of gray stairs, crossed the lobby, out into mist and rain, and fell behind a young couple walking down 25th Street. Paul said, with wet hands, I took her to the shallows. I held her gently in the easy flow. I moved her back and forth, nose to tail, until 3 bubbles of air emerged and she regained her strength. Until finally, as if she were my own child, I released her. The couple turned south down 3rd Avenue, holding hands, talking about theater and what they plan to do later. In New York, if you're not careful, you'll fall out of the sky and crash into the river and nobody will even hear you. That's not cool. Everybody knows there's electricity in giving yourself over to your dazzle, your swagger, your sword-swallowing, fire-breathing days under the big top where human cannonballs blaze. Wet your hands, Take yourself to the shallows. Hold yourself gently in the easy flow. Move yourself back and forth, nose to tail, until 3 bubbles of air emerge and you regain your strength. Until finally, as if you were your own child, release yourself back into the unreachable depth and velocity of the breaching stream. Thank you.
Thank you. So before our next speaker, reader, there's going to be a short intermission right after. And in the lobby, there's a couple tables set up, one of which is Cancer Support Services Holy Cross Hospitals program. We're going to have 3 ambassadors out there. Marco Schmidt, all-around awesome guy. What's up, buddy? Jan Smith, who is on the advisory council for cancer support, along with Liz Fox, the assistant cancer support coordinator. They're going to be out there answering questions. They have material brochures and, of course, accepting donations if you'd like to give a little more to the program. Also, Christine Sherwood, our next speaker. Come on up. Make your way up here, Christine, wherever you may be. Yeah, Christine. So Christine is going to be out there as well with Skip Bellier, who did the amazing promotional video for this event. Thank you, Skip, wherever you are. I know he's out there somewhere, too. So Christine's got a couple of books, Remember Who I Am. Help Me Remember Who I Am. It's a poetry book, her first one. And then Fire and Ash, The Alchemy of Cancer. She's selling them both. $15 for Fire and Ash and $20 for Help Me Remember Who I Am. 2 for $30. She's donating $5 per book to the program. But what's most important about Christine is I feel like she's my kindred spirit because what she's done with her cancer experience, she almost died twice. She's used it to serve this world and do good work while she's still here. And I'm doing the same thing, so I really admire her for that more than anything else. More than anything else about her, even though she's funny and, sexy and all those other things. So, without further ado, where did that come from? I don't know. Hey, is my wife out there?
Yes, Molly is here.
All right, here we go. Christine Sherwood, give it up.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here tonight. I'm honored to be here tonight. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. It's for such a good cause. So I'm originally from Wisconsin. I'm from the Midwest. And from a very young age, I never felt very much at home there. I always felt like it was a little too tight and there wasn't a lot of space. And there was this palpable but invisible backdrop in the society there that if I leaned back too far, I heard things like, we just don't do that, don't act that way, we don't wear those kinds of things, we don't do those kind of things around here. So at age 17, I left home to go in search of what I imagined existed somewhere out in the wider world. In 1977, the year that Elvis Presley died, I was driving from Florida through Texas to Santa Fe in my 1957 Ford Econoline van. Waterfall blue. Anyway, I was driving up 285 with a friend of mine, and that morning was a red sunrise. I'd never seen anything like it. And by that afternoon, as we were coming up closer to Santa Fe, it was hailing with the sun out, and everything was just a glitter. And my just adventurous 20-year-old heart knew it had found its home. Santa Fe was more like Taos back then, but it wasn't until my car broke down in 1994. Yes, another car breaking down story. We have a lot of those. So my car broke down on a visit to Taos, and I ran into friends which I hadn't really planned on seeing, but because I had to wait to find an engine, I was actually offered a job during that breakdown time. So eventually I moved to Taos in 1995. And very unlike the Midwest or any other place that I have lived, I found a place where what I could do was I could lean back, and I could lean back, and I could lean back, and instead of bumping into a social backdrop, what happened is that I found myself laying face up on the earth, staring into a pristine sky, wondering what the hell I was doing in this place that offered me so much space that I could hardly find myself. But I began to understand that this lack of backdrop offered me the freedom I have always longed for. I could discover and define and unburden myself in my own authentic manner with nary a guideline to keep me in check. This is great. And then I found all of you who I think were looking for the same things. So at times, everyone discovering themselves without borders or boundaries looked like utter chaos to me, like electrons that have no center to encircle, no nucleus to bind all the powerful creative energy in this valley that we're blessed with. But I experienced a method to our madness because I became privy to the order in this chaos of Taos. In 2006, I was diagnosed with a very late-stage rectal cancer, and I experienced the power of a community fiercely committed to being a tribe. I became the nucleus you all danced around. I could feel the unconditional love that is born out of defining ourselves through the fire of the history and beauty of this place. Many of you are here tonight. You brought me food, you carried me, you financed me, and held me deep in the mystery of your own wildly self-defined hearts. Cancer created its own chaos, but within the diameter of Taos, there was no chaos for me, only a woven tapestry of humanity as you encompassed me so I did not have to carry the weight of cancer alone. Before I could discover the gifts that cancer would bestow upon me, I had to be taken down to bare bone, Taos style. The Kali spirit of this land, mixed with ancient traditions, begged me to dive into the deepest aspects of myself. So, as I received chemo, I envisioned the golden light of God coursing into my veins, the wisdom of radiation employing its power only into the site of the cancer. And during long surgeries, I listened to ancient Hindu chants so that God would hear my pleas to stay connected to my heart's voice. But like so many of us here in Taos, my soul wished for the razor's edge. It wanted to taste death and to lose breath. It wanted to stand on the edge of the abyss and escape the body to experience its lightness of being. Prayers in all traditions were being said by you, by my friends, by strangers. There was sweat lodges, there was Buddhist meditations. You all came around me. And there were even friends and strangers, complete strangers, who showed up at my doorstep to lay their healing hands on my body and help me through this process. These are the passions that Taos has fed me on. I have become closer to the person I always dreamed of being here, and it is here that yet another chapter of my life is emerging. And it is in your company that I dissolved and return to stand here with you today. I have learned that cancer is the messenger, not the message. Cancer is Kali demanding that I wake up, meet her unrestrained gaze, and in her complete compassion, push me past my limited imagination of who I am and what I am here for, just as Taos has often done for me. Kali has asked me to change the fear-based language of cancer and to know that if I remain only a survivor or fight a war, instead of participate wholeheartedly with whatever life deems mine, I cannot embrace the totality of the gift offered me by cancer. I cannot hear the wild call of my soul to be free of the conditions that are set on me by a part of society still holding up that illusionary backdrop that has no vision for my complete healing. This path, to my utter surprise, has within it emerged a new gift, which was the gift of writing, is the gift of writing. As Jason already mentioned, I've written 2 books. One is called Help Me Remember Who I Am, which is a collection of poems that I wrote while I was actually really in the cancer experience. And then Fire and Ash was published last year. And the writing of these books guided me and helped me to live my way into my own truths that were not easy to fully imbibe. I had to allow the rawness of grief to wound me yet again, to find a forgiving home for the anger, and embrace the relentless pain. But most of all, answer for myself the questions of why I suffered, why I still live, and why I someday will die. I know death is not a failure. The death experiences that I've had are actually my most cherished moments. They're very freeing. But if I allow myself to be carved by the hands of a power far greater than I can imagine, I will live in simple peace and forgiveness and find the courage to stand in this life that was created for me to live and help others down the path that I have already traveled. And I hope to do all of that here in Taos with all you courageous hearts, where there is no backdrop to hold us back from our soul's true legends. Thank you.
You know, I think Jason was right. There's nothing sexier than that kind of vulnerability. So please, during intermission, familiarize yourself with Cancer Support Services, get some information, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back. How's everybody doing? Woo! All right, we have 4 more stories for you. And just before we get going, I'm a big person when it comes to thank yous because I believe it's important to acknowledge people. So I just want to acknowledge Clint, for starters. He gets a big special round of applause all by himself. Because without him, this event would not be happening. And then, of course, the folks at the table, Marco Schmidt, Jan Smith, Liz Fox, thank you for helping to get some information out there and take donations for the program. Skip Bellier for putting together the promotional video for this. Danielle in the back for filming. And who? Andre, sorry, I couldn't hear Clint. And Andre, thank you, Andre. And then those that submitted stories that did not get chosen for this one, thank you for your submissions. Also, the readers tonight, because we wouldn't have this unless they were reading for us, right, telling stories. And last but not least, you, right? Because without you, we'd be telling stories to each other, and that wouldn't be nearly as fun. So thank you.
And thank you, Jason, again. So, our next reader, I was sitting at the World Cup one day, and I was sitting there and I was very depressed. And I was riding my bike. I'd ridden my bike into town from El Salto, and I was sitting there with my coffee and my cigarette, and I was just feeling pretty down. And I get this text message, and it says, "My friend Joe said that I should meet you. I'm just moved to Taos." And I said, "Okay, this should be interesting." I said, "Well, I'm sitting at World Cup. If you want to come over, come over." And she did. And she came over, and we proceeded to have this immediately deep conversation. And we were so deep in conversation. The reason I was depressed is because my girlfriend had just left me again. And sitting there, and I'm deep in conversation, and I see my ex-girlfriend drive by on Paseo, and traffic's backed up. So she's kind of stopped there. And I'm on my bike, and I'm in my biking gear, which I know she finds to be incredibly sexy. And I think to myself, this is the moment when I hop on my bike and I ride up to her window. But I was so into the conversation that I just couldn't do it. And I will be forever thankful to Taylor Warner for that.
That's humorous. I had no idea that any of that. Okay. So I'm pretty new to Taos, and so my story is more about the series of events that led me to Taos. I've only been here since July. But first, I guess I want to dedicate this story to Natalia Oncina, who I can't see her, but I know she's over there. Without whom I don't think I would have survived the events of this story, much less survived without my soul going dormant. And it's my wish for every one of you that you have someone who stays present with you and holds the space the way that she did for me. So this is called My Personal Apocalypse. When I was a little girl, I always fell asleep with a glass of water at my bedside. I must have been 4 or 5 when I noticed that the glass of water would leave my night table at some point during the night, and when I woke up, the water was across the room, sitting on my bookshelf under the window. Although I didn't realize it until much later, I took for granted that things change position while we're sleeping. This was a completely natural conclusion. Later came the explanation that my mother moved the water after I fell asleep so that I wouldn't knock it over should I gesticulate my dreams. It's easy to write off this experience altogether as the humorous misperception of a child. I wonder, though, what is it about that memory that keeps resurrecting itself in my presence, in spite of all of the untold moments that seem lost forever in the fog of time? That glass of water transportation ended up indicating a trend in my hard-won way of seeing. Remember it while I tell you the story of how I came to Taos. On March 15th, 2014, I had a total mental breakdown. I was attending Fairhaven College, the interdisciplinary college at Western Washington University. The concentration that I had created was called Catharsis, Writing the Shadows. I knew I wanted to study writing because words were my everything. I believed fervently in their power, and I was spurned by their shortcomings. It was the making of a passionate love affair. I especially wanted to know how the ugliest, most tragic moments of our lives become beautiful and fulfilling when converted into art, and why story is such a universal part of humanness, a part that's been found in every culture at every point in time, spanning the globe. It seems to be as necessary as laughter or crying. I had just begun an independent study project on greats of literature who had committed suicide. I should add that was of my own design. Ernest Hemingway, Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath, all the usual suspects. But the one who totally captivated me was the contemporary writer David Foster Wallace. I was reading Infinite Jest, his 1,000-plus page novel, complete with footnotes and mind-bendingly overwrought descriptions that somehow work. A bit past the 100th page, there is a scene wherein a girl in a psych ward is being interviewed by a complacent psychiatrist because she has attempted suicide. The way that she described her psychic pain, the solidity with which she argued that to go on living was not desirable, it was all so familiar. Both of my parents struggle with depression and anxiety. They're both on antidepressants and anti-anxiety drugs, and in the case of my dad, they're not helping at all. In the preceding years, I had been experiencing a steady increase of panic attacks. They were existential, nightmarish. I became convinced that I'd found a writer who understood me. To my sensibilities, David Foster Wallace conveyed panic and depression with unparalleled realism. In preparation to write a research paper about David Foster Wallace, I read article after article about his suicide, his wife finding his hanging body, links between creativity and mental illness, the rocks in Virginia Woolf's pockets. When it hit me, I stood alone, ruminating about all of this beside the kitchen table, and all at once, terror poured cold over everything, demonic possession of the air itself. It seeped thick as a blood clot through my skin and into my rib cage and under my fingernails. I was steeped in the loudest silence that I had ever known. I fled the house. For the next few days, I outran demons. I barely slept. All I could eat was the occasional raw vegetable, a head of cauliflower, a few carrots. I could hardly chew food. It passed right through my body in the form of putrid liquid. I walked many miles every day. One of the soles of my boots broke in half. I remember sitting on the bus, and there was this man in a security officer uniform slouched over the seat in front of him. His hair was gelled, and his uniform was clean, but he had red, veiny eyes, and beyond the eyes, he looked desperate and afraid. Soul exhaustion. I recognized that despair. I was sure he was liable to produce a firearm from somewhere in his clothing and kill all the other passengers and then himself, driven to this by the merciless torment of wondering if he eventually would. Somewhere in the first couple days of terror, though, a miracle happened. My pseudo-psychedelic panic began to alternate between that and indescribable clarity. I went from just wanting things to go back to normal to changing the way that I saw everything about my life. Business as usual was effectively and permanently disrupted. Panic is a brilliant mechanism. It brings us hypervigilance of the moment so that we can survive the threat, even if the threat is within. One cannot be hypervigilant of the moment without being struck by the absolute mystery that anything exists at all. Panic and euphoria are not actually so different, and I came to barely prefer one to the other, or even to differentiate them. The whole world began to speak directly to me, saying relevant things through songs that I had listened to 100 times, but never actually heard, through books that I was reading at the time, through auspicious encounters with strangers like Clint. I had layers of epiphany about my mind first, then my animal self and the natural world, and then the nature of time and space. Though my consciousness oscillated violently between peace and terror for a long time, and still occasionally does, I have changed my relationship with suffering, and I've experienced a resurgence of miracles in my life. Which brings me back to the memory about the glass of water. As a girl, I did not imagine it lifting levelly off the nightstand and hovering across the room like it was in the hand of a ghost. It simply was in one place, and then it was in another. This was so logically pure. And from my vantage point as an observer, which is all I will ever know, that is literally what happened. I departed from time, and when I returned, objects had changed their positions. That was my Gnostic experience. It was my story, essential to me because I am nothing more than an elaborate work of fiction. The two idioms I remember my mom repeatedly imparting on me were trust your intuition and question everything. When I am doing both, I am consistently rewarded with clear messages from my environment, and they all seem to indicate that anything outside of me that I can perceive is not actually outside. It is colored by my preferences, by the story I tell myself about myself, just like my face is imprinted with my features, just like my home is decorated to my taste. The boundary between myself and my story cannot be found. From that perspective, it stands to reason that so-called external reality can be much more interactive than most people ever find out is possible. That's why the air itself became possessed when I was afraid. I have tested my interactive reality hypothesis with stunning results. Suddenly, the world seems alive, like a lucid dream. Those of us conducting our experiments become members of a secret order, slipping through the cracks of the space-time continuum. It bears mentioning that the predominant mental health paradigm regards such heightened levels of consciousness to be fits of mania, probably worthy of administering medication. Seriously. Ultimately, I am alone in here, in my glittering vessel of experience that I can never leave and that no one can ever enter. That used to be the basis of my existential panic attacks. It made me feel that my realness could never be measured or verified. Yet now I don't consider it lonesome. I realize that reality is not intrinsically flawed. That flawed is a judgment of the mind and therefore fiction. When I embrace my magical sphere of perception and eagerly watch what passes through it, suspending classification, I find that the range of delights it has to offer is endless. My appreciation of other people especially is enhanced. I experience them most fully when I acknowledge that the very thing that separates us, the boundary of subjective experience, is the part of us that is absolutely the same. When I truly grasp that, I don't have to summon any emotion. Compassion naturally flows in me. At the time of my personal apocalypse, I was on track to do a fiction MFA program at the Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I had a scholarship. I had been living in the New York City in my mind for a long time. When my personal apocalypse struck, though, I sprinted contrary to the well-meaning advice of nearly everyone I knew. I denied my admission and instead went to intern on a farm in Catron County, New Mexico, the county with the second most square miles per capita in the United States. Basically, the antithesis of Brooklyn. During the 5 months that I spent on the farm, I reconnected with myself and my mother organism, the earth. But I began to have persistent dreams that I applied to an MFA program in the Southwest. I researched a few programs and applied only to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe. I was accepted with a scholarship. Because it's a low residency program, I don't have to live in Santa Fe, but I still wanted to be close to the campus, and that's how I followed my dreams to Taos. I've been here since July, and already I've set up some plans, hoping to contribute to this community. I've been facilitating workshops in creative writing on a volunteer basis through Somos, which is an awesome thing. Spreading my curiosity about the transdimensional phenomenon of story. And as soon as I get my ducks in a row, stay tuned, I plan to open the Taos Alternative Library, a member-curated collection of books and a hub for Taos's community of inspired, hungry, lucid, and playful storytellers, soul activists, and lovers of art. In other words, misfits, malcontents, and mystics. Thank you for embracing me here, Taos. And even when it's hard, I'm honored to witness you.
I swear to God, I've started Infinite Jest 4 or 5 times, and I'm at that exact passage right now. No lie. So when I was garnering submissions for this event, a few people who had read before submitted things, and I said to them, you know, I'm doing unique readers every time, and nobody gets to read again once they've read once. And then I had to put the caveat in. I said, well, except for Ted. And the reason that that's come about has been through an odd set of circumstances. I asked him to read it the first one. The second one was for his nonprofit, Golden Willow, so of course he had to read. And then this one, I realized that, so Ted's been a part of my family for almost a decade now, and he's been a part of my family in that he's been there for me, not just in my times of trials and grief, but also through my successes. And he's been such a huge part of that. And I realized that as close as I am to Ted, his story, the grief that he's experienced, to me at least, is overshadowed mostly by the loss of his daughters. And I tend to forget Ted also lost a wife and a brother. And I really wanted him to have a venue specifically to talk about his story with cancer. So, Ted Wired.
Thanks, Clint. So between Taylor and I, we have 41 years in Taos. So thanks for adding that one, Taylor. Jason, thanks wherever you are for what you do. I watched your heart really drop this evening when I said, you know, in my time of needing Taos support group, it didn't exist. And I watched your heart just go funk. But it didn't mean Taos didn't support me during that time. And the people who showed up to take out a bloody mattress or a ruined out piece, who we didn't even know, or even just show up for grapes, are what Taos support group now gets to do. Of all the different ways we don't think about, of that drive to town, of that being able to maybe hold up someone who still wants to go shopping but can't stand there alone while the spouse parks the car. So thank you. And Jason, you know, Golden Willow Retreat started because I had a passion for a place where grief was okay. Grief was actually good. Grief was an emotional healing process that was natural and normal. And then along came you to say, hey, you know what? We need to also not just talk about grief. Let's turn cancer into an okay word because it's very real. And tonight, I read what's very real, which usually isn't discussed. And that's 2 years that I think are my biggest degree. Cancer. When Clint asked me to speak at this amazing venue in which locals are given the opportunity to complete a manuscript and vulnerably share from their heart and soul, my first thought was, hell no. My second thought was, okay, he's been able to take me out of my comfort zone for a third time. He must be thinking, okay, Ted, third's a charm, you'll finally get it right. My third thought was, wow, here's a chance to support Taos County Cancer Support Services. There were no other thoughts except yes. I'm a survivor of cancer, but not in the typical way. I am the loved one, the husband, the father of two at the time, who lived through this and survived the 2 years of my wife Leslie's huge fight and work, and slowly evolving and transformation and even death of cancer. In this process, I too transformed into an entirely different person, in which those 2 years of Leslie's cancer are an everyday part of the rest of my life. A wise teen who I was seeing after his dad had died of cancer once told me, nobody really knows what happens inside that cancer bubble, you know. Only those living in it. Everybody else comes and goes, but isn't there for every day, every night experience of a family living inside that bubble, you know? I've never forgotten those words and realize I am grateful for all the amazing heroes who stepped through the daunting and dark cave and into the home of someone in need due to cancer. These are the true angels of bringing breath, hope, care, and love into a sacred bubble, a sacred world in which death and life are all balanced on the tip of a pin, and where the unknown is so prevalent that even the next sunrise is not certainty. Thank you, caregivers, and thank you, Taos, and thank you for Cancer Support Services for being those angels who don't physically stay in someone's bubble, but leave messages deep in the heart that are never forgotten. That is why, as awkward and nerve-wracking as it is, I stand before you to peekaboo into the cancer bubble, my cancer bubble. Clint, thanks for the opportunity. Leslie and I started dating in the fall of 1979, our senior year in high school at Taos High. She was quiet, grounded, and had a silent presence and balance of the polarities of strength and vulnerability. I was a pretty wild guy with ski racing, being goofy, auto mechanics, cruising the plaza, and being, let's say, rather gregarious. As we dated, we just continuously became closer and closer, finding many things in common once the outer layer of human presentation was peeled back. Our senior year at Taos High was a time of getting to learn just how many beliefs we had in common and how simple it was to be together. It was easy to be with her, and she allowed me to be me, and in this, my heart and being shined. Our senior year of college, we married. It never crossed our mind that being 21 and 20 was young. It was just that this was supposed to happen, and so it did. Over the next years, we became established back in Taos as a new and upcoming family. Leslie, working at the Taos News, and me, a school teacher and tennis pro. Our children, Carrie and Amy, were born. We owned a small home. We enjoyed the world of family, hard work, no money, and a lot of love in the nest of Taos, New Mexico. Leslie, Carrie, Amy, and I started out on the next journey of a strong foursome, moving into each of our own destinies as well as our family's destiny. In January of 91, we had dinner at my mom and stepfather's house. It was a nice dinner, and towards the end of the dinner of the evening, Leslie asked Charlie, who is a pediatrician and is here tonight with my mom, to check out this strange small bump. It felt like she kind of had this extra rib. She had one more rib on one side than the other. Charlie didn't say much and just checked it out. Later on, my mom let me know Charlie got on the phone immediately after we left. He was pale and he was scared. He had asked Leslie to come in for some tests the next day. Leslie and I made it through the day with each other with very few words. We were just two kids trying to be sane in some sort of cognitive level of insanity, as it did not take every moment from us. Fear was running through every part of our bodies and souls. In that fog, it was clear we were in a mess, and Leslie had some sort of cancer. It was determined she had sarcomatoid renal cell carcinoma, with 2 tumors, one in her kidney and one in the dura of her brain. Home from the test and ready for bed, I had one of the longest nights of my life. Leslie and I laid there both pretending to be asleep, unable to speak. Questions ran through my head once again. How can I be a single dad? What will happen if we run out of money? What is Leslie thinking and feeling? How are we going to do this? Why is this going on? What is cancer anyways? If I'm melting down, what is going through Leslie's mind? What if I can't handle this? What if I can handle this? If there's a God, what are you doing, God? I didn't know if I could do this, and I wasn't even the one diagnosed with cancer. The noise in my brain made New York City at rush hour seem silent. About 2 a.m, she turned to me and broke the ice with these warm and loving words. You know, babe, I would want you to remarry if I die, right? Here she was already trying to set up a transition for the girls and me if it was to go that way. Her grace never broke. In the next 2 days, we had wills written and notarized. Amy was baptized, and we had the strangest baptism goodbye party. In a matter of 1 week, she was to have her kidney removed, which had a 5-pound tumor. If this went well, she would have neurosurgery by the end of the week to remove the tumor from her brain. All of this was in a hurry, hoping the removal of the tumors would buy us time to figure out what was next. Leaving Taos was hard. Leslie knew this might be the last time she saw her daughters. Goodbye changes when death is right in one's face. Goodbye means you might not see that person again, nor them you. We were on the fast course of learning about cancer, surgeries, protocol, regimen, experimental, traditional, Eastern, MRIs, CAT scans, cancer centers, and so on. But at the bottom of all this rigmarole were 2 young parents with 2 young girls scared to death. Monday morning, as Leslie was getting ready for surgery, she handed me the Walkman and asked me to listen to a certain song as she took a quick shower. The song was Peter Gabriel, called Don't Give Up. It was about a person who, when scared and out of answers, is lifted by friend and community. This was my first intense cry. The song dropped me onto the wall behind me. I just stood by the bathroom door, crying as I listened to the words. My back slowly slid down the wall until I was a ball on the floor. I knew it was Leslie telling me somehow all this would be okay, and whatever was to happen, there would be life again. The seed of hope was to become our motivating factor to move through the next couple of years, and it's still the seed that keeps me moving. It was learning that hope did not have to have attachments to outcomes. It is distressing the outcome and realizing how it can control us, and somehow letting go of the outcome and having hope brought us serenity. I believe these were my first days of starting to understand something called faith. I sat in the waiting room watching the Persian Gulf, somehow finding it similar to my situation. A war was going on, major decisions, life on the line, confusion, and a lot of concerned people. As the bombs fell and shattered directed targets, I felt as if each piece of jagged shrapnel was hitting my soul. This was the beginning of our war, the war of cancer. It seemed crazy that there was no time and decisions needed to happen fast. We were on the racetrack of Western medicine, and there seemed to be no time to take a breath, as that may be the time that decides if Leslie lives or dies. Next came the very aggressive chemotherapy called MAIDS. I never broke it down to know what each letter meant because I knew the chemicals would just overwhelm me and make it even scarier. As death seemed to always be knocking on the door, we put our energy into staying as calm as possible and staying with positive, loving thoughts. I'd bring the girls down and they could see their mom. We had let them know that she was sick and needed some surgeries to start to get better. The girls at this point were 1 and 3. Leslie was always so happy to see them. They were probably her best medicine through the whole cancer phase of our lives. For us at that point, it was a war. We were fighting an entity that had attacked Leslie, and we wanted it killed. This changed over time, but right then we were out to get rid of this invader. Patience, frustration, fear, and love ran through each person while the TV kept updating us on the outside war that was so far, far away. Life was held on 2 swinging doors and the masked doctor who came to give us the latest news. As time went on and chemo continued, while surgeries also continued, I would look down at my wife and wonder what had happened as this physically beautiful person was now completely destroyed externally. Black eyes, swollen face, staples down her belly and over her head, gauze wrapping over her head, shunts, pressure valves coming out of that head. What had happened to my wife, my friend, my partner? Was this the same person? Each time she awoke and spoke, I knew it was Leslie. Her soul still shined, and her inner beauty was still there and growing with the energy to move forward and with whatever was next. There wasn't a sense of fear, just love and determination to do the best within what was being put in front of her and her family. Her beauty shined through all those scars and stitches. A certain amount of normality did come around for us on the superficial levels while swimming the depths of life and death. Normality on any level was a blessing. We had amazing news in August when we called for the latest test. We were told they could not find anything that resembled cancer. We celebrated that night by taking the girls to dinner at a restaurant. It felt like we were back on the path of being a young family, growing up as a team. This news lasted a whole 12 hours. We received a call saying there was a mistake. They had found a spot, and they were worried. It was the last celebration we would have of no cancer. And yet, it was the beginning of many celebrations of living each day and each breath, and those are all cherished. Leslie did well in taking control of her destiny and moved rapidly into researching a combination of Eastern and Western medicines. She wanted to beat this cancer and regain her life. She learned meditation, prayer, macrobiotic cooking, live food, sweat lodges, drumming, journaling, honesty, and traveled all over the country talking to doctors, cancer centers, and anything or anyone else who could find what might hold the next clue. We had quit fighting cancer long ago, and now Leslie was working more on the terms of her path and what decisions she needed to make. The cancer was no longer an enemy that she fought. It had become her teacher, and she wanted to graduate from this teacher's class. When we told the neurosurgeon it was time to go home, he sat down and began to cry. He too knew it was the right decision. I will always honor this man, this doctor, for taking the time to let down his doctor's shield, set away cognitive dissonance, and show his humanity and humility. This gift of 5 minutes of care and compassion was and is priceless. We packed our bags and went home. What a strange feeling to know you had given up on Western medicine and that chances of recovery were so low, and you had a relief to be going home, to be with the medicine of family and town and community, and see what the next step would be. I'd become accustomed to being a passenger on this journey, but now Leslie was no longer driving the car, and I was no longer the passenger or the navigator. She had turned the keys over to me, and I was scared. I knew I could I could not back down from my next task. The girls needed to know. How does a father tell his daughters that their mom is going to die? I don't know, but I knew I had to do, and I just had to give them the information. It also meant I was officially giving the information to myself as well. I think both girls took the information much better than I did. One morning in early January 1993, I was tying Carrie's shoes. Amy was crying, and Leslie called out for help. When she called out this way, it meant she thought she was dying. I stopped tying the shoes. Carrie started crying, ran past Amy, and went to see what Leslie needed. She told me very clearly and calmly and with love that it was time to stop the meds. She was no longer living. I was no longer living, and the girls were neither of them were living anymore. We had taken it as far as we could, and it was time for us all to be reborn. It was time for rebirth. I knew what she was saying, and I also knew she was right. Leslie knew it was time to say goodbye to the girls. It was difficult for her to talk by this point. She slurred her words, and they came slowly. When the girls came in the room, she magically spoke clearly and told them that the time had come and just how much she loved them. She reassured them that they could not have changed this outcome and that they were her angels. She let them know how she would be watching over them with unconditional love at all times, and she was very proud of them. This seemed to increase the rate of her departure, and on Sunday, she died quietly and peacefully with her hand in mine. I now prayed for Leslie to have fast travels and be rid of this body that had been her teacher as well as her tormentor and was also my teacher, which gets to continue to be my teaching. With her family around her, me holding her hand, she slipped away, and there was such a finality of energy through the room. She was no longer imprisoned, yet there we sat with a body once known as Leslie, and now it was a body. Leslie was gone from that earthly spot. I slowly laid her head down, kissed her on the forehead, and looked around the room. I awoke in the morning from a dazed night. I stared out in the window in our living room, in which it was raining, a rare moment in Taos during the month of February. As I stood there, I felt a little hand reach up to mine, and I picked up Amy with one arm, where she rested her hand on my chest and shoulder. I felt another tug, and it was Carrie, and I picked her up with the other arm. As we looked out onto the horizon, I realized Leslie was correct, and we were all born in that moment, in a new life and a new way of being. As I thought about this, Carrie said, "Look, Daddy, it's raining. Mother Earth is crying for Mom, and you will get to spend more time with us." In those words, I knew Leslie lived on through her girls, through me, and through each person she had touched along her path. Cancer was the earthly cause of my wife's death, the midwife of rebirth and life, the teacher, the villain, and the path that is bigger than any of us that we each walk. I will learn quickly that due to cancer, I am who I am today, and that the keel of my boat of life is Leslie. And she is the mystical guidance that allows me to move forward while honoring each breath, each step, and all connections with this life. And in that, we both live on. Thank you.
Ted, through your vulnerability and pain, you give us all strength, and I thank you for that. Love you, Ted. All right, our next storyteller, Mr. Todd Loomis. What can I say about a best friend like Todd Loomis? We ski instruct together, we drink beer together, we learned how to surf in Nicaragua together, we do a radio show together, we sleep together. No, wait, hold on, I got that wrong. Our wives sleep together. No, you get the picture. We're close. We're close. So without further ado, Todd will tell you the rest of the story. Mr. Todd Loomis.
Thanks, Ted. Ted, you definitely reminded me of, I had a thought at one point when I was lying in hospital beds that I felt that sometimes it was easier to be the patient. And I'm going to mess up the stage for Jason. I like to pace. Not too far from the microphone, though. If you haven't caught our radio show, it is ADHD radio. And I can't use the podium because my eyes are that. I got to have things a little bit closer. First, I do want to thank Clint and Jason for putting this on and asking for me to write and speak about one of the more vulnerable, emotional aspects of my life. Guys, next time, can you ask me to write about green chili cheeseburgers? Second, a big shout out to my mom. She's going through her second round of cancer treatment. I myself am about 25 years of remission, so kind of runs in the family, I guess. How I got to Taos. Camp. If I showed you a picture of a one-legged child with cancer, alone, bald, in a playground, you'd be really, really sad. Now picture 100+ skinny, some legless, some bald, some sick, some healthy kids screaming and running around gleefully in the same playground. Now that's pretty freaking funny. Welcome to Cancer Camp. As a camp counselor for 4 years, I was the only one who ever volunteered for male teens. No one volunteers for male teens. My first day, they woke us up by playing John Denver's "Thank God I'm a Country Boy" for revelry. I had immediately asked for permission to hijack the sound system and formed a DJ contingent that was mostly hip-hop. NWA bootlegs were really popular at the time, but not allowed. The next morning, we started with Country Boy, then we broke in and announced the takeover. We then played an hour of music, mostly hip-hop, and rotated it through the kids each morning. But on that second day, my group, we became a crew. Pranks were big. And the younger cabins would come in during the day, and they would toilet paper our tents when we were at archery or crafts. We decided, we formed a task force. We would wake up at 3 a.m. and TP the inside of the other tents and cabins while everyone was sleeping. So yes, I taught young men from the inner city, the Jewish neighborhoods, and every area of Baltimore in between, and this was downtown Baltimore, how to move in darkness and avoid detection. If you want to know the trick, if you're walking through a tent toilet papering it, and you see somebody open their eyes, you close yours and you don't move. Shh, don't tell anyone. I actually almost got so basically people would wake up to this entire spider web of toilet paper in their tent and wonder how the hell we did it. I almost actually got thrown out of camp for that. For 4 years, I had many of the same kids, and we had some funerals, and yes, we had some additions, but the common bond between these kids who were bagmen for drug dealers, rich kids from the suburbs, and everything that Baltimore had to offer was that for 2 weeks out of the year, we all got to be kids, me included. Swim, archery, DJing, games, lots of guests, and lots of pranks. Jeff. One guest who stands out in my mind who visited us was Jeff Blotnick. He had the same cancer as me, Hodgkin's lymphoma, back in what I call the dark ages, when we were trying to figure out cure. 2 years after treatment, he won the gold medal in the 1984 Olympics for Greco-Roman wrestling. One of my 17-year-old football-playing campers was his foil at the pool. After a beautiful presentation about survivorship, self-understanding, and self-responsibility, he demonstrated Greco-Roman takedown techniques by throwing 200-plus pound Andy into the pool over and over and over. After putting his gold medal around another one of my campers' necks who was really into wrestling, the camper lost his breath and exclaimed it was the most amazing moment of his life to wear a gold medal. Jeff looked at him and stated, that medal is just a piece of metal, and that it was his determination and training that was important. I got to hang out with Jeff. He was actually a really cool man. He died 3 years ago due to cardiac complications caused by the treatments that saved his life in the 80s. He's actually now in both the Wrestling and MMA Hall of Fames. Spunky Girl. My third year at camp, I was sitting at orientation and a young lady started asking questions. Actually, it was more like demanding answers. I perked up and looked over and saw this beautiful young woman in a blue Hopkins 93 med sweatshirt, barely remember it, and instantly fell in love. Turns out she was working in the medical facility called the Funny Farm, where they gave meds, chemo, and had a top-notch facility of Johns Hopkins docs and med students at camp. At the first camper lunch, I got corralled by the teen girls to sit with them, a motley crew of outspoken inner-city girls with a penchant for teasing a specific male counselor. When lo and behold, Spunky Girl joins us. Halfway through the meal, Tanya, a 16-year-old whose 2-year-old daughter was with Grandma at the time, proclaims, "You two would make a great couple." Never underestimate the wisdom of a one-legged city girl with big attitude. Medications must be left at the Funny Farm. Given many of the counselors were on meds, we needed to store them at the Funny Farm, not in our tents. Being known for mischief and expecting the director of the camp, who was a fairly stern oncology nurse, think Cratchit, I prepared my medicine bag. I walked up to the Funny Farm front desk, and the camp director isn't there. Spunky Girl is. I explain I'm dropping off my meds and pull out a plastic bag, a can of Budweiser in a Ziploc with my name on it. She asks me my dosage. I say 12 ounces. She asks me how often. I say as needed. And she wrote it all down into the medicine log. Kenny! Kenny was a young African American with Down syndrome and cancer. Kenny was a 16-year-old, 150-pound, a weightlifting football player, emotional roller coaster. And I was his counselor. On his first day of camp, Kenny fell in love. Kenny was so in love that the mere mention or sighting of his beloved would send him into a crying, no sobbing fit of grief. It got so bad that I had to coordinate with his love interest that my crew and she never crossed paths. And that was difficult considering the tight quarters in a 100-acre camp. Kenny, I could say, definitely had an eye for the ladies. During a visit by that year's benefactors who donate the money such that we could have camp, this incredibly dressed couple, think Abercrombie and Finch catalog, were walking across the grounds, and the striking woman in a flowing skirt and big red cowboy boots did not go unnoticed. Kenny jumped up onto the picnic table in front of the cabin, started jumping and screaming and yelling, "Hey, Boots! Hey, Boots! Hey, Boots!" The thing I can say about Kenny is he had incredible taste in women. As 3 years later, a little after I decided no longer to do camp, I married Spunky Girl, who we had both fallen for. Fast forward. I got to get to Taos sooner or later. History eraser. Wait a second, I came prepared. Thanks again, Ted. After 12 years of marriage, Spunky Girl and I decided to roam the country, me working remote as a computer geek and she as a temporary doc. A few years in, we took a winter off for a ski safari. We kicked it off in Taos. A year later, we were working in Española, and after miscellaneous job functions, ended up here in Taos, which we now call home. I became a part-time ski instructor and started ride-sharing with some guy named Jason, who mentioned he had cancer a few years earlier. Like a secret handshake, we became fast friends. 7 years later, he asked me if I wanted to write something for this very event. And I said, hell yeah. While writing ideas, one thought popped in my mind was, what if I could erase cancer from my life? Completely obliterate the pain, the surgeries, the fear for my family, the constant aftermath, the need to deal with my own mortality? I gave this a lot of thought. I would not be in front of you now. I would not be friends with Jason and Brent and Clint and Ted. I would have never known our friend Scott. Rest in peace. I'd probably never have found Taos, never traveled the country in an RV, never have spent 20 years with my wife, let alone having one of the oddest ways of ever meeting. Never have known so many young people fighting for such a devastating disease. Never have learned at the age of 26 how fragile and beautiful life is. Cancer sucked, and still sucks for me. Luckily, I was dealt a bad hand and not a death sentence. I can live with the scars, I can live with the doctors, I can live with the pill box of medications constantly reminding me of what day of the week it is. So no, I don't want to erase it from my life. I would never want to erase it I do, however, want to erase it from future lives. This event is a great example of how people are still fighting, such that fewer and fewer people will ever have to ask themselves, what if I could erase cancer from my life? Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. Incredible. So, the thing about Todd and Jason is I'm a little bit of a dark character, and oftentimes I'll be up at Ski Valley and I'll start my day early, which makes me even darker. And I'll walk in and I'll be a little bit kind of like this, and maybe I'm down because my girlfriend left me again, and whatever it is, and I fall into these depressions, and then I see these guys, and they're so up. And they're just smiling, and I look at them, and I know their stories, and it's like, okay, there's no way that I can't get it together and pull it up for this. So Jason Pfeiffer's our last reader. Again, thank you so much for your passion, Jason, for this, for everything you did for this event and everything you're doing for Cancer Support Services. Jason Pfeiffer.
I really want to know how many girlfriends you've had, Clint. Later, another time. Okay. Thank you all for being here and sticking around. Last but not least, I'm just going to hop right into it. My piece is entitled, What's So Funny about cancer. November 6th, 2006. I graduated. Or maybe I should say happily completed, because that's what the diploma read. At least I like to call it a diploma. But nonetheless, I had finally finished my cancer treatment. I walked out of the room for the last time, or so I hoped. No, I prayed that it was my last time. Laying on that table day after day, getting zapped, I was done. I was finished. I was handed a Xerox copy, and on it read, "Congratulations, you have happily completed radiation treatment." Yeah. It was a black and white copy with some rainbow colors on top highlighting the word "congratulations." All the nurses at Christus St. Vincent signed it. It was the first time in a long time I left that building without hearing the words, "Goodbye, Mr. Pfeiffer. See you tomorrow." Considering I had just finished radiation treatment and still dealing with the WTFs of a cancer diagnosis, I guess the diploma was a nice gesture. I certainly did not laugh about it at the time, but today, 9 years later, when I look at it, I laugh. Ted Wired once told me that they could have given me a Lamborghini, and it wouldn't have been good enough. Would have had the same effect. And you know what? He was right. This was my journey, and I had to come to accept it and move past it on my own. No gesture from anyone would have been good enough or done that for me. I mean, I can't blame St. Vincent's. For one thing, my Xerox copy of a diploma was a hell of a lot cheaper than a Lamborghini. I remember the first time I laughed. I was diagnosed by Dr. Coburn right here in Taos. He told me I had to have my testicle removed, my left one, in case anyone is wondering. I agreed without hesitation and scheduled my surgery. But the reality was that I was scared shitless. I didn't want to die at 30 years old. So my surgery was set for a day or two later. I can't even remember the exact time frame anymore. But what I do remember was telling a friend about my cancer diagnosis. Well, you know, life is like a pinball machine. Sometimes you score points, and sometimes you lose your balls. That was the first time the cancer was funny. I laugh at some of my nicknames I've acquired because of cancer. At a leadership retreat, I was dubbed the One Bald Wonder. I actually started using that to introduce myself. I wasn't sure if I was going for like an alter ego superhero thing or porn star. Somehow, it just made me feel normal. Or maybe it was an excuse to get away with more, kind of like my get out of jail free card, you know. I have cancer, you got a problem with that? Oh, and then there was my playa name at Burning Man. You'll love this one. It was given to me about 9 months after being diagnosed, well, at the American Dream themed event. So a buddy of mine, not the same one, who compared my losing my testicle to a pinball machine, but an even more sarcastic friend, decided we should get costumes for every day of the week to go along with the theme. So one costume was Native American in nature, of course, to go along with the theme, American Dream. And we got dressed up, loincloth and all, stood facing each other, ready for our journey as Indians out onto the playa. And he stands, looks at me and says, "Me, Thunderfoot. You, walks with one ball." And I laughed till I had tears in my eyes. Not only have I had the experience of having cancer, I've also experienced being on the opposite side of the fence, which in many ways was much more difficult and mostly not very funny. A few years back, one of my best friends was told he had cancer again by Dr. Coburn, although his was not like mine. He had cancer that had already spread throughout his body and was going to kill him in about 6 months. That was not funny. I was one of the first people he told, and I had no witty comeback or insightful thing to say. I think I just said, "That sucks." And so began a chapter in my life as a friend to a dying friend who could not do anything to make things better except be a friend. There was not a day that went by that I did not think about the inevitable, or a day that did not in some way revolve around his life. For example, I bought a trailer for my boat to go on rafting expeditions like the Grand Canyon, and the first time I used it was to load up weeds to take to the dump because he was no longer able to. And I think I still have some weeds in there. Oh, and there was the time that Todd and I decided to ride Horse Thief Trail. Our buddy thought it was a good idea as well. Mountain biking was something that we enjoyed doing together. But we learned that doing a 10-mile mountain bike ride when you have stage 4 cancer probably isn't a good idea. We almost killed him. I remember sitting under a juniper tree and contemplating whether I should jump off the rim of the gorge or not after hearing him say, "This ride is going to kill me before the cancer." I have to admit, we all did laugh and had a very memorable moment under that tree. That was our last mountain bike ride together. My friend did die a few months after that ride, just about 6 months after being diagnosed. During the planning of the inevitable, it was decided that upon his death, I would be the one to drive his body to Albuquerque to be cremated. I volunteered for the job. You do what you have to do. Plus, I thought that it was appropriate to have one last ride with him. I'm not going to recap the whole drive down, but what happened in Espanola is worth telling. See, you already know. As we know, Espanola always has the cheapest gas, along with an assortment of weird characters. So I stopped in Espanola for gas, as I always do, pulled out my card, stuck it in, put the pump in, started pumping gas. Just then, a man approached me. Torn, white, dirty t-shirt, ripped jeans, couple missing teeth. And he says, "Hey, bro, want to buy a gold ring? Check it out, it's a good one." I was not in the mood. I stared at this guy for a few moments, and then simply said, "Hold on a minute. Let me ask my buddy." I opened the back door, which we were standing right next to, and revealed my friend, wrapped in sheets, with his head and face uncovered, looking very dead. Empty eyes staring directly at us. "Hey, Scott, want to buy a gold ring?" The look on this guy's face was priceless. He did not say a thing. He just proceeded to back away, slowly. And then he turned and walked away quickly. That's it. At the time, I really did not think before I acted. It just sort of happened that way. It could have been the shock and trauma of just losing a friend, combined with the fact that I was driving his body down to Albuquerque to be cremated, something I've never done before. Or maybe it was just two friends screwing around and having a good time as we always did together. And as we hit the road again towards Albuquerque, we had a good, long, hearty cry and laugh together. When I drive through Espanola these days, I'm always on the lookout for that ring dealer to apologize to him for that traumatic moment. "Sorry about that, bro. We just weren't in the market for a ring." So why do I share this with you? Life's bookends, the beginning and the end, birth and death. It's the only two guarantees in life. As was once said in a cancer support group here in Taos by a good friend of mine, life, it's not for keeps. Everything in between is the story that we get to create. Like it or not, it's not always pretty, not often easy. And I get to have a few chapters on cancer in my book, and I choose to write it and share it with the world. Because why not? After all, it's the part of my story that has helped shape who I've become, minus a testicle. It's a reminder that we get one shot at life, and we never know when it's going to come to an end. Live it to its fullest and greatest potential. Be the author of your book of life. Do not let cancer or anything else write it for you. Oh, and laugh. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much. It's been a wonderful evening. We're going to do this again in March, and that'll be for the Taos Men's Shelter, the Taos Coalition to End Homelessness. If you have a story, you can submit it. It's lifeislove108@gmail.com. If you have a Facebook account, please like us on Facebook. It's Misfits, Malcontents, and Mystics. We'll see you all next time. Thanks.
Cool. And thank you again, really quick. Don't forget to pick up one of Christine's books or both of her books. The holidays are right around the corner. They've helped a lot of people. And thank you, TCA, for this amazing venue. Thank you. Good night.